focus on disaster relief and decentralized identity, this panel. And it's going to have a focus on disaster relief in the United States and how Algorand is involved in the development of something called the Care Wallet. But in order to tee that up, we're going to show you a video and give you kind of the lay of the land of the current state of affairs. So if you could watch the video or tee it up, that would be great.
Tens of thousands of houses. All this is going to have to be repaired before we get into November.
When a disaster hits, it's utter chaos in a community.
Programs need to come in faster so that people won't have to wait over 5 years down the road.
Blockchain technology will be transformative in the disaster relief and recovery space.
We have got an offering called Survivor Wallet. And with that, it means that the organizations who respond to a disaster can say that there are supports available at a particular location. And it means that when you've been validated as an individual, you can go and make a claim to a retailer like a Walmart using the Survivor Wallet. And in return then for validating who you are and proving that there is value within your wallet, you can get those goods to replenish your home. And it means then that the person who is funding that, they've got much more granular information about where the money is going.
As far as how having this app will benefit the case management team as well as survivors, I think the application process and not having to do it through paper is going to be really big.
In the counties that we work in, sometimes it can be rural areas, and there can be special difficulties in those areas for our survivors.
So having it delivered is going to be really big for making it easier for those people, especially older ones who just aren't really able to get around that well. So I think that's going to be a huge help to our survivors.
This app is going to be a huge benefit, not just with transportation of the items that they need directly to them, but also in the relief, in the knowledge, the mental stress that will relieve so much anxiety to know that this is available. It's there. When and where I'm ready, I can get these services through the app delivered directly to me, to know we have hope to offer them the minute we call them.
So I'm going to be moderating this panel, and I'd like to bring up Kevin Peach from St. Vincent de Paul Disaster Services Corporation, Niall Dennehy from ATEC, and our own Christine Mohan from Algorand Foundation. Welcome. Welcome. The moderator's chair. I have to turn to face you guys. All right, so we also have a decentralized identity component wrapped up in this as well. So, but what I want to start with Kevin Peach, who has been on the ground doing disaster relief in the United States for about 17 years or so. And just to give us the lay of the land, like what is the state of disaster relief? What's been changing and what do you see going forward?
Yeah, so I started back in 2009 during Hurricane Ike and Gustav. I was detailed by the Federal Emergency Management Agency to go down to Galveston, Texas after Hurricane Ike and Gustav, and it was just chaos. It was dysfunctional. We had 8 organizations fighting one another in the front yards of who got to remove the debris from that family's home. I remember, my job was to go around and find every organization that was doing some form of service and categorize them and understand who's going where, doing what. I think it's clear that technology was a huge gap 17 years ago, And quite frankly, there's a huge technological gap today, but I am definitely encouraged by the private sector and the technology community coming forward and providing ways for us to do a better job and to meet the needs of disaster survivors.
So is it like you read the paper and there's a fire and then there's a hurricane and there's a stronger hurricane and they used to be category 2s and category 1s and maybe it was a tropical storm and maybe when it made landfall it would be something a little bit bigger. Now it's category 4 and category 5 and category 5 is absolute catastrophic damage. What have you seen in terms of, is it true that the volume and frequency of disasters is changing?
No question about it. I think the way that the climate has definitely shifted, we have seen disaster after disaster concurrently. And, in the past it was, Kentucky got hit by a tornado in April, Tennessee got hit by a flood in April. Now we're seeing multiple states getting hit by the same disaster concurrently, back to back, coupled with the decline of volunteerism. The sector is overwhelmed, and there has to be something that comes in to mediate that, and technology is the easy fit for that.
All right, so I want to jump from you to Christine to lay the groundwork before I get to Niall about a key component to what we're about to talk about, which is decentralized identity, which is one of those things that's going to change the way that people receive aid with much greater ease. So, Christine, talk about decentralized identity generally and what it means in this context and elsewhere as well.
Sure. So the reason I'm pleased to be on this panel is before I came to Algorand, I was at Kilt Protocol, which is an identity protocol built on Polkadot. And so I spent the last 2.5 years educating, really. It was always the first step of every meeting, of every event. And so I'm going to go back to that a bit. Because when you talk about identity, many people don't understand what it is. Your identity is not your driver's license in your wallet. It is not your passport in your drawer. Your identity is made up of 2 things. It's an identifier, which is your face or your fingerprint, something that is yours, given to you, not by a government. And then the piece of paper, the license, that is a credential. So you take the credentials, you take the identifier, that's you, put them together, and that forms your digital identity. And then when you take it one step further through blockchain, decentralized identity is really reaching that promise of Web3 in terms of being able to take back control of your data. What's more personal than your identity? And we all got one. And actually, we have multiple. So it's also interesting that through wallets, through Para, eventually we'll have more identity capabilities, credentials. You're able to actually even combine some of these credentials. Perhaps, for instance, we just had our colleague doxed. He might have had one credential with his, quote, real name or real world meat space name. He might have had another credential that he used in gaming for in his wallet as well. So that's the definitions.
So with that, Niall, maybe 2 years ago, we approached you, or you approached us, or we approached each other and decided to get kind of invested in disaster relief in the United States. Again, as Kevin points out, it's a very antiquated system. A lot of it is paper-based. Even FEMA, which is a huge government agency under the Department of Homeland Security, often uses its spreadsheets and it's paper and it's tedious, and you wouldn't believe it, actually. I mean, believe it or not, it's crazy. So we approached each other and said, let's develop something that really transforms this with identity as a central piece. Just tell us about that journey and where we are today.
Happy to. And first of all, thank you for all the support, Matt, that you've given us. It's been a pleasure to work with you. I see Doro at the front here. Thank you, Doro. And you just touched on identity, but I'm very conscious of all the great people at Algorand we've worked with, like Bruno, like Joe Polney. So the really innovative stuff that I'm going to talk about very shortly wouldn't have been possible without the support. So thank you. Great event to be here.
But to give you a little bit of a story, Matt, how we got going, some people may or may not know that our first project was in a refugee camp in 2015. And what we did back then, we think we were a bit ahead of our time, was merge identity with payments for traceability and transparency, and to show where money is going, how it's being spent, by whom it's being spent, what it's being spent on. And we won a number of awards back around 2017, one of them which Christine Lagarde, when she was the managing director of the IMF, Citibank ran a big award called the Tech for Integrity Global Game Changer Award, using technology to fight corruption. Bit of a mouthful, but as a result of that, we ended up being paired with a number of different organizations with a grant from Rockefeller Foundation. One of them happened to be Kevin's organization here, and somebody else who I see in the audience, Robbie Pachichko from UNDP. Rockefeller gave us some money. They said, go away, complete 2 projects successfully. One of them happened to be in disaster relief, and we got paired up with Kevin. They told us about the work that they were doing, and to your point, Matt, about paperwork, we found that a lot of the processes that people like Kevin and his colleagues do was oftentimes very paper-based. It was manual, there was duplication, sometimes there was fraud, there was a lack of traceability, a lack of transparency. So from the learnings all the way back to 2017, 2018, when we started building on Hyperledger Fabric, if I'm allowed to say that in here, way back there, we decided that we would create a process and a program for these guys called House in a Box. And what we did was we took effectively real-world assets, we tokenized them, we enabled people to go to a furniture store in Florida, purchase assets, and we found during the course of that process, there wasn't any way of identifying who the individual was. Were they already receiving entitlements from a different body? So we decided to create then, with the support of Algorand, the CARE app. And CARE app, in its simplest form, is an application that's available on iOS and Android that a survivor can download today. And what we do is we run them through a very lightweight KYC AML process, whereby they're checked against some sanctions lists, etc. Once they're validated, the most recent piece of work that we've been spending a huge amount of time on, again with the support of Bruno and Joe and all the team at the foundation, yourself, Doro, etc., is putting a cryptographic attestation on chain that a wallet that is associated with the DID, which is self-sovereign, which enables people to own, control, manage, eventually monetize their data. An attestation is put on chain, and that means for the organizations that we work with, like DSC, etc., they can validate and they can vet that that wallet has gone through a check process, and what we can do then is issue prepaid virtual cards. That can be from Visa, that can be from MasterCard. We've now got the ability to issue cards for approximately 800 retailers in the US, people like Walmart, Home Depot, Amazon, and it means that a survivor can take the wallet, they can present the value within the wallet, they can redeem that, whether it be gifts or gift cards or vouchers or prepaid, at a checkout. They can use that online, they can add to their Apple Wallet, they can add to their Google Pay, or they can receive goods in a short space of time. So that's where Care Wallet is right now. They're the advancements we've been making. But again, it all goes back to the learnings that we got from working with people like Robbie at UNDP, with Kevin at DSC. So you can say that it's been built on 8 years of blood, sweat, tears, but also passion.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Talk to me a little bit more about that cryptographic attestation and decentralized identity, because we're at the cusp of, there are a couple of billion people in this world who don't have identification. You can't go to school, you can't access health records, you can't access health care. A whole host of services that you're denied because you don't have that basic identity that gets you into the door. But we're at the very early stages, right, of decentralized identity. Step us through that process of, if I'm applying for services and I use a DID, how is that approved? And where do you, what's it going to take for this to really take off?
I'll share with
Niall.
Sure. So a DID is a decentralized identifier. So it's like a unique digital fingerprint. And so this is what you attach credentials, attributes to, and it becomes this very, very unique, very critical component of your identity online, and decentralized identity specifically. And then how are you using it within the app?
So the way we approach it then is with based on the principles that are set by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C. And what they've done with their DID standard, which we've made available for any app in the Algorand ecosystem and well beyond, and had a chat with the guys at Hasab Pay about that last night, about possibly leveraging the DID algo DID method. But in its simplest form, there are three parts to that, and there are three parties involved. There's the issuer, there's the holder, and the verifier. And if you take the example that we're speaking about here today, the issuer would be a government body, for example. That could be US government in the case of what we do. They would issue a passport to an individual. And the KYC AML process that I talked about, that an individual survivor goes through with the Care Wallet, they take the document they've been issued with. We check that then against sanctions. Then you've got the holder, which is the survivor who's been granted that, and you've got a verifier, which is a verifying agency. That could be DSE, for example. But what it really means is that we put this stamp or this cryptographic attestation on chain, and even if you are somebody who already has a credit score, you've got an identity, it's an identifier of an individual associated with the representation of them, and it means that for other things, that could be insurance, that could be payouts, that could be applying for a bank loan. There's some record associated with the wallet that any verifier can look at. So the Algorand blockchain, in theory, once a survivor's wallet has been verified, it could be a commercial bank can see that that has happened, whilst all at the same time the privacy of the individual remains with them. So there's no PII information on chain, but all the good stuff, when we talk about selective disclosure, zero knowledge proofs, that can all be wrapped up, bundled into a form of a DID, which we have published for the Algorand ecosystem with the support of the foundation.
And that's actually critical, the privacy piece, that people get concerned, especially if they're not familiar with digital wallets, they've never used, they've never bought crypto. What are you taking, where's my identity going? And so the fact that it's a hash of your personal information, it is a portion of it. It is, as you said, there's no personally identifiable information that we're saving on the blockchain. It also begins to set the stage for moving away from very centralized databases where and maybe this is, Kevin, you can speak to this in terms of, which are really like a honeypot for hackers. If you have disaster survivors, all their personal data on these potentially databases of maybe small nonprofits that might not be secure, they get hacked, and then that information is out there.
So I want to come back to you a little bit later, Niall, about for example, Hasab Pay leveraging that DID, because I think that's going to be extraordinary. I know we keep talking about Bruno, but he's very eager to see this thing spread. But Kevin, back to you. Step us through the life of somebody who's just been hit with a hurricane and is looking, maybe it's a couple of weeks later now, they're into kind of longer term recovery. They've lost their house, they've lost their furniture. In some cases, they've lost, more than that, unfortunately. How does that person currently access the services and goods that he or she needs to get off the ground?
It's a great question, and one of the reasons that I'm such a huge proponent of the Care Survivor Wallet is a function of accessibility and equity. I know that, my parents certainly couldn't go to a warehouse and pick up a brand new bed and a sofa. They don't have a pickup truck. They don't have the ability to go do those things. Right now, US survivors have to go to a point of distribution center, a multi-agency resource center, or a disaster recovery center to register, to get an intake form and register with a variety of agencies, all asking the same exact information to give very small individual benefits. And that's over. We can no longer do that way. But one of the problems also is that we don't have the data because everything is so paper heavy. We're not able to iterate from one disaster to the next because, as you've all seen, disasters happen every week now in the US. The agencies don't have enough time to make the changes to meet the demands and the evolving threats and hazards of the disaster cycles. So by having something like the Care Survivor Wallet, we have a better idea of what the real need is at that time. Because I'll tell you what, if you have a need now, and then you have to go, organizations have to go fundraise for it, they have to ship it, then they distribute it. By that time, the survivor doesn't even need that anymore. They have a different need at that point of time in their survivor journey. So having something that is quick, rapid, efficient, being able to meet the team in the right quantity, at the right time, in the right platform, is the future for disaster relief, period.
I remember we were at a national volunteer conference in, I think it was St. Louis last year, and I met somebody from Islamic Relief, Kevin, in the United States. And there's been a fire in the Bronx, some disaster, and he had a backpack filled with gift cards, like $75,000 worth of gift cards, walking through the Bronx to distribute to people who had, like hundreds of people had lost their homes. Is that what St. Vincent de Paul does at times as well? Do you guys just hand out gift cards and spend hours in lines?
Not only that, I remembered being down in Beaumont, Texas after one of the largest hurricanes, Hurricane Harvey, sitting at the Walmart customer service for hours waiting for $50 gift cards. I had to get over 1,000 of them. 1,000. I was there for 8 hours waiting for them to manually load $50 on so that we could distribute them to incentivize survivors to do an intake form, share what their needs are, and it was an incentive. And now, with this ability, it's not just a one-time card disbursement. We can top that off. And again, as I mentioned earlier, what they might need now is drastically different from what they might need in 10 days. But being able to communicate and have this app, we can continuously top up that survivor's account with additional funds to meet the needs as they evolve throughout their survivor journey.
Yeah.
To go back to what you were saying about iterating, right? I think I remember, again, another New York Hurricane Sandy and going to volunteer with my sister, and just there was just so many, like, water stuck to the ceiling, but people didn't need water right then. What they needed was paper towels and mops and gloves because their basins had been flooded and everything had, drifted away. And so the ability for the governments or for disaster volunteers to know, okay, let's really canvass the community for these things that we really need for the first 2 or 3 days, and then the water, day 4 or 5.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then, Niall, what does it mean when, let's say you're living in southeast Florida or southwest Louisiana, you're hit by a hurricane, and then you're hit by another hurricane, which happens like a lot. That identity piece, how does that save the survivor hassle and time? And number one, and what does that mean for the donor organizations as well as they look to see, okay, wait, is this the same person that applied for aid here, or is it somebody different? Talk about the benefits to both the survivor and the donor.
Yeah, so what we've discovered in the space is that oftentimes a survivor, unfortunately, depending on where they live in, they can be and are sometimes hit by multiple disasters, or there may be numerous different supports available from multiple different agencies at the same time. And what often happens is they will go to, let's call it a resource center. There may be a number of different agencies based within there. It could be 10 of them. One of them, Kevin's, another might be American Red Cross, it might be United Way, it may be Islamic Relief. But the thing that we found that really resonated with our solution was oftentimes people have to fill out forms over and over again. And what happens is they end up reliving the trauma of what they've been affected by. And they're oftentimes applying for duplicate assistance. There's oftentimes a lack of coordination between the different agencies. And ultimately, if you look at somewhere like the United States, a lot of the funding comes from government. It's dispersed through FEMA. It goes down through member organizations of NVOAD, like American Red Cross, like DSC. But again, if you think back to the beauty of a blockchain, what it is, it's a permanent, immutable, non-corruptible ledger that you can be separated out. And it means that if you've been validated once, you don't need to validate again. So it's almost like that old saying, read once, run anywhere in, let's call it computer terminology, but it means that that survivor can go with the app, present it to an agency, and if they selectively disclose, which is a little bit technical, or prove who they are, prove that they've been validated, the other agencies will then see that these are the services they've received already. But what you got to do is get everybody involved in that process, back to the issuer, holder, verifiers. They've all got to be part of that triangle of trust. But that's where it is, and I think we're still working towards that. It's a very big idea that we're, to be honest, some bit away from achieving. But right now, with the building blocks that we're putting in place with the Algorand blockchain, with the DID algo method, with a user-facing application, bringing those three things together with the issuer, verifier, holder process, you can see that there isn't any reason that this whole ledger-based system for moving value quicker to individuals isn't far more efficient than what Kevin has outlined there with paper, boxes. And what I've heard anecdotally is sometimes people will go to a Walmart, they physically buy the gift cards, they put them in a box, they ship them across state borders, and sometimes they can end up being spent at a different location. But capabilities we have in Care Wallet, geofencing, merchant category codes, redemption of specific vouchers at a location, and we can even now, with a new integration that will go live, hopefully next week, we can now go to the SKU level of the biggest retailers in the US. And it means that if you take Walmart, for example, the provider who does the back-end technology for us and for the platform, it means that we can now go to the individual product level at a store and put some form of restrictions that are appropriate at the back end of the platform, so that if, for example, you try to buy alcohol, tobacco, firearms, you won't be permitted to do so. But that's not for us to say or to decide, but with at the discretion of the agencies, that infrastructure is now in place. And to your point about people like Hisab Pay and other operations in the Algo ecosystem, I was chatting from Owen from True outside the door earlier on. He now sees the potential to leverage DID Algo, so our job is to promote that across the ecosystem, but fantastic building blocks have been laid.
Yeah, no doubt. And Kevin, I just want to go back to you quickly about who out there, give us the landscape of aid agencies in the United States who are looking at this, and then take us to the pilots that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, which are pretty exciting, and what that means, and whose eyes do you want to see on those pilots?
Sure. So recognizing that in order to make this shift in the US, it can't just be one organization. It needs to be cross-sector. It has to have that whole community approach in mind. So in partnership with the Walmart Foundation, Algorand, of course, Aid Tech, but also organizations like the American Red Cross, Islamic Relief, Mennonite Disaster Services, Catholic Charities, and a variety of other organizations. We're all partnering, pooling funds together to try to pilot these in different areas. Primarily, we're looking at Florida. Our organization is responsible for providing recovery frameworks for half of the state, which is about 400,000 people impacted. And we're deploying the Care Wallet to provide different forms of assistance. Right now, we're looking at the Walmart gift card, but we're also looking at Kentucky and Tennessee. I even spoke with one of my colleagues, Sandra from Haramba, about looking at Louisiana, even some microeconomic models and how those things can shift, and how we can not only bring money into the community, but keeping that money in the community. Because it's not just the survivor that's recovering, it's the economy of that community that's recovering. So it's integral in keeping that money there. So there's a lot more pilots that are going to be coming up. We've been very strategic of keeping a reserve fund, recognizing that this year is mimicking 2017, which had about $355 billion in damage. We're already on pace to not only meet, but exceed that amount. So as those disasters come up, those hurricanes come up, I think we're going to be prepared to engage with both national and local level partners to implement this solution.
You're kind of announcing something too today, right?
Yeah, so we're very proud to be partnering with the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, which is a membership association of over 200 disaster relief nonprofits. And the program is called the American Response and Resiliency Program. And that is going to be providing organizations the ability to deploy to multiple states and to respond to multiple states with ever setting foot on the ground. So rapid financial assistance and not with a very low human resource component. So I think it's going to be a game changer for the US. I'm hoping to continue to learn from my international colleagues on best practices, and I hope for once the US can provide a best practice for the international community.
All right, great. That's awesome. That's exciting. It's been a long road from there to here, and Niall, you just got some news from the Apple Store. It looks like it's close to being version 2 that incorporates the DID algo is going to be approved imminently, it looks like, and which is great news, right?
Yeah, we are hopefully hours away, Matt, if not minutes from getting that all approved. So as you refresh my mail, but yeah, as you know from again, Doro and the team, hard work, the hours that we've spent on it, all the teams working hard together, but we're just at the finishing line right now. But again, proper infrastructure is now in place to help us scale that app, but also help the apps within the algo ecosystem and beyond scale in an impactful manner.
I'm really happy to hear this conversation because it's each of the partners working together and the importance of standards. So using the DID algo method, which is based on these W3 standards, and this means that we can then begin to tie together 2, 3, 4 projects across our ecosystem, across different verticals, identity, which is a fundamental layer. It's very exciting.
And that's the exciting thing, isn't it? I mean, how do we leverage that with other partners in our ecosystem, right? I mean, what's the potential there?
It's enormous.
It's enormous. Yeah.
Ben, our person who heads up Nigeria efforts, unfortunately couldn't be here because of passport issues. It's too bad there isn't some technology that could help, put something in the chain and reusable passports and credentials. But he is actually also working with some state government, more than one, and they will be using identity for, first they're doing more of a financial services type of IRS thing, but they are also looking at disaster relief, healthcare records, voting records, anything where they really do need to also provide some privacy there as well.
I should say, Matt, then for us, again, disaster relief is just a starting point for the CARE app. But the thing that we've learned as a startup that's been around since 2015 is keep your focus narrow, nail and scale, rather than going too broad, too big. We have tried in the past remittances, welfare, healthcare, donations. We had the first baby born on the blockchain back in 2017 in Tanzania and Africa. But when we think about the potential with this app, we really see it as a payouts, aka disbursements platform that when the time is right and we nail and scale this with the partners that are assembled, we see insurance payouts as being a big part of this, linking it to things like smart contracts, oracles, preemptive disaster relief, preemptive insurance, and even, I guess, when it comes to ESG, climate change, there's a lot that we think we can do, and we can associate that back to show the efforts that happen at an individual level. And again, all of these are bundled up, credentialized within the wallet. So we think there's a lot more to come, but disaster relief is the key focus right now, but watch this space.
I think, in the United States, where this is going to be deployed, again, in Florida and Kentucky and Louisiana, so many of the political class in the U.S., when they hear the words blockchain or crypto, they kind of go running for their offices where they, don't fully understand what this technology can do. But what if we could show people in the U.S., people in key districts, that actually blockchain is of great value to your constituents who are in huge need? So look to our spaces in the next couple of weeks to see how these pilots are going to start and where they're headed. Look to our spaces to see what organizations are going to be partnering with us in the future, and we hope it's as big as the American Red Cross and maybe as big as the Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA, because I think once this begins, it's going to be very difficult for it not to kind of keep going and building and building and building, as all of you have said. So we have a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions, wants to ask any questions about disaster relief in the U.S., the CARE wallet, or anything else, please feel free. And if not, we will wrap this up, unless you guys have some closing thoughts. And we'll wrap it up, and we'll take off. Oh, we had a question.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I would just like to ask, this quick question to all of you guys. I would like to know or to understand your perspective of how all these digital identities will be applied in the future for maybe in the insurance sector, how these parameters are going to be useful for all these industries to assess risk in a better way. Thank you.
Insurance insurance and reinsurance especially, and that actually does tie into disaster efforts and initiatives, being able to also track the trends, track the spends. It's a huge use case for blockchain and decentralized identity.
Parametric insurance, right?
Totally. Parametric is a big one, but specifically, how will digital identity help people? I think it helps organizations know their customer better, know who they're dealing with. And even when it comes to capturing data, you can consent what data you give over to an organization. But I think really, when we speak with insurance organizations, what I've learned is a lot of them work on spreadsheets. I've got a buddy of mine who works for the biggest reinsurance company in the world, and he told me that the entire organization, more or less, runs on 7 spreadsheets that are connected up together with all sorts of formulas. And the biggest problem that they have when it comes to their business is knowing who they're paying out to. So if you think about what we're building here, it's almost like a know your customer better with their digital identity that they control, that they consent. And when you think about the payouts then, the efficiencies that we can bring going from TradFi rails, T+3 type settlements, bank accounts, ACH payouts. Once we get there, which we will do with the Care app as well, with USDC embedded, you can see how that's more instant, it's more automated, it's programmable, and parametric being a prime example of how we think blockchain can bring multiple efficiencies.
Yeah, no question. Thanks for your question. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.